Hi, everybody. It's Tuesday at 1 p.m. I am Scott Fogarty, and this is Commanding Cyber Leadership Conversations on Contested Cyberspace. And today I'm talking with Trevor Horwitz, who's the CISO at TrustNet. One thing I wanted to say that helps me think about the world and how it evolves is making sure that people who operate in accordance with conventional wisdom test it. And I think that conventional wisdom or commonly held beliefs that aren't tested can sometimes lead to our downfall. I think of the Maginot Line in France in World War II, in which there was an assumption that spending an awful lot of time and money on building a fortification to keep Germany out of France was going to work. What hadn't been anticipated is Blitzkrieg, which combined air attack, mechanized, and infantry in combined arms at lightning speed. The conventional wisdom wasn't right then. I'm concerned that the conventional wisdom in cybersecurity is in some part getting in the way of adaptation to what I think is a blitzkrieg for attack using AI automation. So that I think is the backdrop for a lot of the concerns or the issues that I see in cyber. Trevor, I think, is extremely well equipped to understand how the current sort of opportunity to establish the efficacy of your tools may be very effective in large part, but may need adaptation to new realities. So, Trevor, thanks. It's good to meet you. Good to have you here. And I would love for you to talk about your background and what you do at TrustNet. And importantly, and I'll mention that part of the conversation really is directed here on Commanding Cyber at business people who may not have the knowledge to deal with the esoterica of what cyber is technically. And so I think the organization is under attack, and that means that leadership, non-technical and technical, need to be part of the dialogue. So we are interested in making it accessible to folks who may not be, playing an inside baseball. But anyway, thanks, Trevor. Nice to see you. And please give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. Thank you for having us. I appreciate it. So a little bit back, my personal background, born in South Africa. That's where the accent's from. Moved to the US in my early 20s. So I've spent most of my career here in the US. Spent time in big consulting companies and a couple of entrepreneurial ventures. And before I kind of landed solid footing in the cybersecurity space, I've been doing that the better part of 30 years. So, yeah.
And talk about what your TrustNet and the main value proposition that you have. I'm interested in how you see your clients framing your value from a technical perspective, and then how the business guys frame it. Because I think there's probably a difference, and I'm interested in how you react to that difference if it exists.
Sure. So we do like two primary verticals in terms of the services and what we offer to our clients. One is around assurance services, so helping clients validate compliance with industry frameworks. So everything from SOC 2 assessments to high trust, PCI DSS, ISO 27001, and many other frameworks. So we do a lot of validation work. And then the other side of the coin is we help clients testing their security systems. So doing penetration testing, cybersecurity risk assessments, helping them understand, what is it that they have and how do they protect it. And a big part of the value proposition is, of course, the assurance side and creating that trust for businesses, which helps them grow their business, connect to new customers. And then the back end on the technical side, using trust as an accelerator, meaning that the assurance provides the organization a lot of ability to expand into new markets and gives them the ability to go into that with confidence. And we work obviously very closely with the technical teams because most
Mhm.
of the remediation activities and the control sets are all technical. So it's providing, we sit in between those two, if you will, in terms of how we engage with our clients to help them, move the business forward.
Well, talk a little bit about how you perceive the business perspective that may be actually signing checks versus the technical perspective and what you see in the dialogue that plays out between them. I bring a predisposition to believing that many organizations have a difficult time communicating around the key issues that are very technical. And I'm just curious how you feel about that.
I think what's happened in the market is that because there is so much interreliance on organizations where an entity is now connecting their systems and engaging and using service providers across their entire stack, that's created a lot of anxiety
Hmm.
and healthy anxiety, meaning like, okay, so how do we know this vendor? How do we know what practices they have? Is a service provider giving us the level of service we're going to need? And can I trust them with my data?
Hmm.
So that anxiety has caused this boom in the assurance marketplace and in the broader governance, risk, and compliance
Uh-huh.
in order to help facilitate and to bridge that gap and create that trust between the entities. And simultaneously, there's also a interesting relationship between, let's say, the C-suite and the technical team inside these organizations. The
Hmm.
technical team are obviously wanting to have bigger budgets to meet their security requirements, and there's a natural tension with the C-suite who's saying, well, what justify the expense that you're putting into these tools and help us understand these things. And we also help in to bridge that gap with them. A lot of the time is doing the security testing and the risk assessments and the like.
Hmm. So I think when I think about security, looking back, security didn't even exist as a department, 30 years ago.
Right.
Certainly, you had Norton antivirus or something on every endpoint, but it was not a pervasive challenge. It obviously has become so. Uh, in sophisticated organizations, we've seen security become its own department so that you have IT providing capability, you have security constraining capability, and
Right.
then with compliance requirements, you have a third leg of what goes on, which is the governance stuff. And
Sure.
I think there are big gaps in between the three sort of efforts, delivering capability, constraining or protecting capability, and then framing it for a board or for shareholders. Um, Let me ask you, if you had to challenge a non-technical leader to describe their organization's security strategy in language that would convert for someone in the SOC, do you think they would be able to do that? Is that something that they should be able to do? I'm interested, in your take on that.
That's a very hard thing to do because the domain knowledge needed to be able to explain and translate a business requirement back to a technical requirements is something that a lot of C-suite executives don't really have. What more likely to happen in a lot of organizations is the reverse, where technical teams will start off and say, we need these sort of controls,
Uh-huh.
and here is the driver for why we need those controls. So I think what we see, and this is not necessarily a desirable set of scenarios, but often you have the technical team that is driving the conversation,
Uh-huh.
and the C-suite are the ones that are responding to it. We would prefer to have the reverse scenario where the business says, these are the risks that we prepare to take.
Yeah.
Now, what are the technical controls need to be implemented in order to
Right.
translate that into technical requirements that the technical team can actually implement?
Yeah.
A top-down risk assessment approach is really the more desirable scenario.
Well, I agree with you entirely. I also think that, computing became pervasive because it was built to be accessible, interoperable, cheap. Capability has been added through innovation at an enormous, I mean, an extremely rapid pace at scale. Um, and eventually, security is added as an afterthought. I mean, it's bolted on after the fact, after someone designs value into computing. Um, and that creates a problem because it means that for every generation of innovation or extension of capability, it gives rise to the need of a new type of tool to secure the operation, and that makes it really complex. I sort of think that if one reason that it's hard to articulate a security strategy is because it really is more a basket of tactics that are focused on controlling the the capabilities that have been added, and therefore it can't reduce to a well understood strategy statement. Um, and I do think that that complexity makes it very hard for people who know they should be invested in understanding the so-called strategy. It keeps them at arm's length. I don't know. I don't think that's true, and certainly not true in every organization, but it's definitely a challenge that I see. Business leaders have any number of challenges and problems and opportunities. This is one that is they're forced to pay attention to, because if the world were a different place, they wouldn't have to worry about criminals and nation states, but they do, and they're forced to. Do you interact with organizations that have more sort of engaged business leaders, and is there something that characterizes their ability to be in the dialogue that you would point at?
Yeah, we have a very broad uh, customer base, meaning we deal with everything from Fortune 500 companies
Uh-huh.
all the way down to some really small, early stage companies. Our sweet spot is more like the middle market, and that's kind of where we play most of the time. But yeah, the conversations that are going on between those teams will vary based on a lot of factors, including the knowledge and experience of the executives who might
Hmm.
be familiar with security. Yeah, for a lot of mid-sized organizations, just having someone in their organization that has security in their job title is a big deal. And there's increasingly demand and a need for having someone with a C-level title, the security, like the CISO, but it's still not something that is completely pervasive, even in the middle market.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, but and when you think about, but if there is an example of someone, or maybe every organization is different. Are there industries that you think, if you serve multiple industries, where there is more astute, engaged engagement from the business leaders than in others? Uh, uh, um, if that strikes you, or if it's on a organization by organization basis.
No, for sure in the financial services,
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
probably the strongest. Yeah. I mean, we have a large client who their the board has basically said to the security team, you have a blank check.
Huh.
Like we cannot afford to have a major data breach. That's
Right.
how important it is. Now, of course, they have to justify whatever the number goes onto that check, but they want to make sure that the likelihood of that is very, very, very small
Right.
because of the consequences to the business. So
Sure.
they're looking at it from a risk standpoint. And then we have other clients that have really skinny budgets because it's not the highest priority for
Yeah.
them. They're prepared to put their money into other things that to them is a higher growth or opportunity or a larger need.
Right. Well, let's take that very forward-thinking company that says, look, this is amongst the highest priorities we have, and we're prepared to bankroll the effort. Um, how do you think the people are they thinking in terms of meeting compliance obligations? Are they thinking in terms of actually securing the enterprise? And are those two the same thing?
They're definitely thinking primarily the very first priority for them is securing the enterprise. Regulatory compliance, demonstrating trust and assurance to their customer base. That is a consequence of the investment that they're making in their security platforms and the security tools and the security organization. So it's not an afterthought, but it's a consequence of it. But they're not driven by we need to meet this particular obligation regulatory as a
Uh-huh.
primary goal. It's like security first, and our compliance and assurance activities follow off from that starting point.
Well, and that's very interesting because often enough, I think that people put their faith in the standards that their industry must abide by and the compliance regimes, and then they say, "Well, we're doing what we're required or we're supposed to do."
Right.
And I do want to talk about the extent to which a compliant organization is secure.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened up by talking about conventional wisdom, and we have an adversary. The adversary has new capabilities, and I would like to talk about how compliance is coping or equipped to cope with new realities in the conflict, because they are new realities.
Sure.
Um, when an OpenAI agent does however many operations, 17,000 operations in hours, of which 6 or 7,000 of those are discovery events, and there's no indicator of compromise until the battle's lost. How do we reconcile those realities with compliance that is admittedly extremely well intentioned, but grows out of bureaucracies that are observing the past and enshrining the past? How do we think about that?
Well, it's a true statement, I think, across the board, across all different frameworks, that compliance does not equal secure. And often meeting a standard, whether whatever standard that may be for assurance, frankly, is the baseline for having good security. It's
Hmm.
not the end game. And it's hard also for organizations to appreciate, but every network has its own nuance.
Hmm.
Every environment, every business, there's no businesses that are identical in terms of the footprint, the technologies they're using, and the people that are running those systems, and of course the need. So given that, you're always going to have large variances in terms of the type of controls that you put in place and the effectiveness of those controls. The challenge with a lot of the security, or excuse me, a lot of the assurance frameworks is it tends to be a binary assessment, kind of a pass fail.
Yep. At a
With
point in time.
some of them are point in time, but SOC 2 Type 2, for example, is not. It's an assessment done over a period of time, which gives you a much bigger picture, just as an example. But there are obviously others like a SOC 2 Type 1, which is a point in time assessment. But you are also looking at historical data as well. So, what does history teach you about what's going to happen tomorrow?
Yeah.
So, those are all kind of factors to keep in mind when you're looking at any sort of assurance regime. But at the end of the day, the organizations should have the ability to customize those controls to meet their particular needs and get recognition and credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've been thinking about of how you overcome some of this is if you're comparing, for example, a SOC 2 report from a Fortune 500 company and one from a 10-person startup,
Yeah.
how can you both say, oh, they're both meeting the same standard? Because technically they're not.
Right.
There's a vast difference in the amount of resources that are applied there, the sophistication
Right.
to do that. So there should ideally be some other measure that we could introduce to assess, okay, are you following a standard that's acceptable? And that's fine as a baseline if that's what organizations
Mm-hmm.
who are users of those services are looking for, a
Yep.
baseline, and that's fine. But ideally, what I would like to see is some sort of like a equivalent of a credit rating service. It says, okay, we're a triple A rated SOC 2 provider or service
Yep.
provider because they're putting in the extra effort and going the extra mile.
Yeah.
And yeah, for maybe for that startup that had limited resources and they get, a double B or a triple
Mhm.
B rating. And that may be perfectly fine for them in terms of what they're trying to achieve. But I think one of the things is having binary standards like a pass fail for a
Mhm.
lot of the assurance frameworks is disingenuous to the frameworks and not very useful from a business standpoint.
Yeah. I was kind of going further with my question because I understand compliance as meeting standards of operation. What I perceive them principally to be, though, is evidence that procedures were taken consistent with the requirement rather than measuring the effect of those procedures. So, in other words, we can, in an organization, validate that we checked every box in terms of which processes are supposed to be in place, but none of that speaks to the effect under attack.
Sure.
And I think that's an important gap that the automation associated with AI is exposing because if honestly, security is two main strategies: prevent and detect.
Hmm.
Right? Detection only occurs after the adversary's in your midst. And if you have detection measures, great, but with AI, the AI may get a hold of your data well before there's something that fires the alert, because that's detection requires confidence. It requires creating understanding analytically of when behavior meets a standard of potential harm. And that's where I'm going, which is AI is I think exposing the gap between procedure and effect.
Yeah, there's definitely a measure of that, but it also depends on the particular framework that you're looking at. In terms of being able to validate that the controls are actually effective, there are certainly frameworks and standards that test the effectiveness of controls.
Hmm.
So that is built into a lot of the assurance certification process and to meet that criteria.
Hmm.
So I think there are things that are positive from that. But back to the earlier point about all assurance certifications are essentially looking at historical data
Yeah.
or point in time data. So that's the weakness of them. But it's the best proxy that we have for a prediction of the future by looking at what practices organizations have in the past.
Right.
If you had to flip that around and say what would be a more preferable solution, then perhaps something that was essentially a real-time type of assurance. That was something that would be actively monitored, like cybersecurity ratings that are often doing that, or doing things like continuous pen testing. So there's a lot of other things that can happen that can provide you with that visibility. I think
Yeah.
organizations are recognizing that as well. I think the whole idea of having trust centers where organizations are displaying metrics associated with their security programs
Hmm.
and operational stats as well, like mean time for uptime for organizations. Maybe that's kind of like the trend, and that's going to be a positive
Hmm.
impact on organizations just being able to share that with their customers of where they stand at any one
Yeah.
point in time.
Well, I think you characterized it in language that is mirrors my concern, which you said that past performance, looking past, is the best indicator of future performance. That's the proxy for the future state. And the problem is that the past did not include automated attack, and therefore it isn't as reliable a standard going forward.
Hmm.
Um, so the one of the questions that I think is interesting is, um, if you think of AI automated attack as not just speeding stuff up, but reducing the cost of attack, increasing the scope or parallel operations element of it, which is to say that AI makes attacks go quickly, but it also increases the scope and scale of their damage because they achieve their successes sooner than the response regime can kick in. Um, what kind of innovation do you think the world demands that would disrupt that kind of a situation? I see, I'll tell you what I see is an assertion or a truism that AI enabled attack requires AI enabled defense. And I think that's an assertion that is probably right, but it doesn't change the dynamic that's already existing in between attacker and defender. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of investment that's taking place across the board with regard to improving security tools in all different aspects on process procedure, upskilling individuals to adapt to AI type attacks, I think is unprecedented. I mean, everyone is investing hugely in improving their tools and technologies. And this is both the arms dealers, if you will, so the actual vendors within the cybersecurity space, as well as organizations adapting to bringing on those tools and getting themselves set up. And there is going to be a huge change, and there naturally has to be because of the factors that you mentioned. But I think the industry is doing a really good job of putting the money and putting the resources behind this and adapting to it very, very quickly.
Well, but so in that vein, is there a strategy or approach that you see as achieving the kinds of results that are needed from your vantage point?
Well, I always encourage clients to begin with essentially doing a risk assessment of their environment.
Hmm.
And that's where all security decisions should frankly begin.
Yeah,
And that goes back to your earlier point about how do you ensure that there's proper communication between the C-suite and the technical team. And that starts off with understanding risks, understanding what type of vectors can impact the environment, and understanding what the consequences of each one of those potential threat vectors means for the organization.
yeah,
And AI is another threat vector. I mean, it is a new technology, but we've faced new technologies before. We went through similar overhaul when the cloud emerged.
yeah,
I will say not at the same speed. The speed of AI, this is unprecedented. I mean, I've never seen anything in my life for how quickly things have evolved and continue to evolve. I'm
yeah,
sure that's for most people in our industry. So the speed is a little frightening, if you will, just how
yeah,
rapidly things are evolving. But we've certainly seen lots of evolutions in technology and tools. So I think we have the mindset to be able to adapt to this new set of rules and new environments.
yeah.
I just hope people do it quickly.
Well, look, it is an amazing evolution in time because the idea was academic or theoretical not a few months ago, and it's clear and present. I mean, part of you can tell, Trevor, that I have a dog in the fight. I think that cyber defense needs to operate in accordance with the principles of game theory.
Hmm.
I think that the adversary will continue to attack ruthlessly and all the time unless they suffer consequence. And I think it's critically important for leaders, business leaders, not just technical leaders, to frame the issue as a contest between human beings who wish each one wishing harm on the other. That's what it is. It's not bad weather. It's not, something to endure. It's a human who has motivation. And when they touch your network, you need to tell them that they're there and make them feel uncomfortable right away. That's a principle that I think has to be embedded in security. It's how our company operates, and I don't see data science as an answer. In other words, more effective computation, more effective judgment, I think is happening, and it's not a bad thing that's happening. but I don't think it addresses the problem at its root.
Well, if you're talking about organizations being able to defend themselves in, if you will, like a vigilante type of fashion.
No, no, no. Let me be clear. I'm talking about making the experience of the adversary in a network challenging and consequential for them in your systems, not running out onto the street with your 6 gun. That's not what I'm talking about.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. That's definitely a useful tactic. Being able to tie up someone else's resources and get them spinning around, and I think that's a valid strategy amongst others to do that. So, a lot of our security historically has been whack-a-mole. So
Yep.
we're out
Yep.
there. There's a new type of attack, a new type of threat vector emerging. In like thinking through, but when you invited me to come to this the show, I was thinking back at one of the things that happened well back when in my career, where there was a marketing company who asked us to come and help them with their security, and what they basically did was just provide an email service. This is I'm dating myself, but this is a long time ago. But it was a pretty cool technology, and all they did was just provide like marketing emails, and their mindset of the C-suite was like, who would care about an email address? Like, why would anyone want our data? and and we went through that scenario. Well, we did a huge risk assessment project for them, and they still didn't kind of like gel with it. And I mean, within weeks of us completing a risk assessment, before they had time even to digest that, they had a major hack.
Yeah.
And one of their clients was a bank, and all it took for the phishing attack to start was just context with an email. They knew the name of the institution,
Yeah.
and just brought those two together,
Yeah.
and caused like an explosion. I mean, there were so many of their customers who fell for this phishing attack. So the idea there that I was trying to share was that context is so important.
Yeah. Well, you're right, and the risk profile for a hospital providing life-giving care is different from a marketer. But the other point I think that's really important about what you said is that each organization that's creating value in our system of free enterprise is a node of value creation that's part of the whole and is itself playing an important role in protecting the whole. Because you just pointed out, one company's exposure bleeds to another, and you have systemic effects, and that's why I think it's a very important consideration for people who may think it's cyber's esoteric and distant, and there's someone down the hall who's really smart who has this covered, that it's actually part of something we face as a free and open society, and that playing your part isn't just protecting you yourself and your employees and your customers and your shareholders, but because you're connected to everyone else, it's helping to protect the United States. And that's, I think, clearer and clearer to people when their water systems are under attack, and when, boy, it's a big challenge. And I think these kinds of conversations are really helpful for me, and I hope people listening take value from them. But the idea that I did read, risk is a continuum, and you can operate your organization understanding that the investment is required up to a certain point, but beyond is an overspend. The marginal returns of that relative to the exposure aren't necessary. How does that conversation happen when you're leading the organization to calibrate the right sort of risk positioning? Because you're entirely right. It's different for every company. And it's also a
Sure.
matter of temperamental concern, not just, like, what are you willing to tolerate?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we try and communicate to clients and get them thinking is that risk is not inherently evil. because risk is an enabler. It's an accelerator.
Hmm.
It's what enables people to have competitive advantages if they play risk correctly. So there's a good side to risk, and obviously taking on too much risk
Yeah.
or ignoring risk, those are consequences. So I think when it comes to having a mature strategy, just being able to calibrate that according to a scenario that's a planned outcome of
Hmm.
what risk a business is going to actually take is the healthiest approach to that. And risk acceptance is, that is needs to be understood. There's no organization that can operate completely risk-free. It's
Right.
impossible. It's like the perfectly secure network. I mean, today, even if you turned off all of your laptops and completely powered them down, there's still risk associated with them if you had no technology whatsoever. So there's that once you start to understand that you have to have these tools, you have to have some sort of risk associated with them, but you can leverage that risk to your advantage. I think that can be often like a game changer for how people think about it.
Yeah.
I don't even look at the what's happening now in terms of AI as being the so much on the side of like there's so much risk involved. I look at it more from the point of view of so much opportunity. And that's the opportunity that we want to help our clients protect and to
Yeah.
take advantage of the technology.
Right, right, right. Well, there was one thing I know that you are helping your clients meet the insurance requirements in terms of how they can offset risk by transferring it to third parties. Um, how do you? I think business people understand risk in the insurance context better than they understand their own risk on the technology side because it's a, they're used to dealing with that, and this sort of, as you point out, the cyber threat even a couple few years ago was well, they're not going to come after me, and that was probably true, but now attack will be indiscriminate and opportunistic. If you've got a vulnerability, it'll get found. So like I'm curious in your take on how insurance will evolve and how your clients deal with it.
Well, insurance is certainly playing a factor in terms of risk transference and also helping to mitigate like the recovery and understand that there's funds available if there is a significant security incident like a data breach, and that provides that cushion for them to be able to remediate those activities. I think
Hmm.
it'll continue to evolve much as it has, and I think insurance companies are going to get a lot smarter in understanding the risk profile of their customers. I think for the last maybe 5, 10 years, it's been very much a land grab. How can
Yep.
we write as many policies as possible
Hmm.
just to get a foot in the door, and to establish a big practice? And now it's just going to continue to involve, okay, how can we encourage our clients to have the correct security procedures? What is the minimum requirements that they need to meet in order for them to get coverage? And I see those as all positive for
Yeah.
the industry. That's all, net positive, because ultimately the rates will come down for the companies that are making the correct investments and have the right technologies, tools, people, and processes in place. And for companies that don't make that investment, they're going to have to pay a lot more to get that same sort of coverage. So that
Yeah.
to me is a net positive.
Yeah. No, it is. Trevor, you're based in Atlanta. The what is the rate? Do you have a geographic focus for your total U.S. beyond? Tell us about that.
Well, we actually have team members really across the world. We have
Uh-huh.
across in Europe, in Southeast Asia, as well as the US. Most of our customers, the vast majority are North American, so US, Canada, Mexico. But we have clients elsewhere in the world as well. And a lot of our clients have operations outside of the
Sure.
US. So having that international footprint allows us to serve those clients in that geography. And we're not a massive organization. I mean, we do have some very large clients,
Uh-huh.
but the middle market is really where we play predominantly.
Okay. So let me ask you, you might have questions for me. I don't want to preclude the opportunity for you to ask me a question if you had any. Um, I think that I think this conversation is an important conversation. people who we're here as practitioners in cyber to help the world be more secure.
Hmm.
I feel like it's useful to encourage deeper engagement by folks who a year or two ago might have kept this at arm's length because they felt they had it covered. But I think I mean, it's an organizationally critical thing to understand your exposure and to address it in terms that meet the needs of your shareholders and their expectations, so that you're not going to end up with huge surprises. If you had any parting comments, I'd be interested, or anything that you would like to mention that we talked about.
Well, you mentioned some interesting things also about, part of this conversation needs to be educating the C-suite on understanding cyber. And I think if you look at a across the board of the C-suite, people tend to have fairly good knowledge of accounting principles and accounting
Yes, they do.
numbers. I mean, everyone knows how to put a budget together, and everyone knows how
Yep.
to spend money and meet those budgets. It doesn't matter if you're the marketing team or you're the sales team or the people team, whatever it is, everyone understands that. And I think that's probably an area to begin with the C-suite, is looking at, okay, do you have the cybersecurity know-how, at least to be able to be conversant and understand the risks associated with that. So I
Yeah.
think it'll be a huge improvement overall in the business environment. And back to the point that you had made earlier about how we're all interconnected.
Yep.
One service provider is servicing another, and we are facing, nation states and other bad actors across the board.
Yeah.
So the more resilience that we can build up inside our overall business environment, that's going to benefit everyone in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
But the question to you is
Yeah.
back, like, how do you see implementing that level of knowledge? Do we go back to college, or do we, how
Well,
do we
I mean,
progress?
I think it's problematic because I think the solution set is so sprawling. If you look at those sort of landscape maps over the last even 4 years, the number of categories of types of products in cyber has expanded by a significant percentage, and the number of vendors in accounting, if I remember correctly from school, there are a handful of core principles: matching, conservatism, and maybe a couple others I don't remember the names of. But everything flows from one of those principles.
Yeah.
And that allows you to get your arms around, well, what is important for me to know about accounting that I need to subject my numbers to so that they are gap compliant. We just don't have that in cyber, because I think the evolution of technology has been so rapid. The evolution of security has followed it and been so rapid. I am very concerned, because I think that security is a basket of tactics, not an adversary focused strategy. And I don't think you win a contest unless you have an adversary focused strategy.
Hmm.
So that's the way I feel. And I think that I think that the AI enabled threat environment is creating an awareness that just speeding up detection with its error rates is a hard way to sleep well going forward. Look, I don't have the answers to the whole problem, but I do think it's worth talking about out loud, and being and challenging conventional wisdom, and challenging received understanding, because this is a new era. And Trevor, well, I really appreciate your being on Commanding Cyber. I look forward to maybe working with you someday. And thank you to everybody for joining in. And we will see you soon again. Thanks, Trevor.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be here.